We have on the agenda a number of
This is your real
If
estate.
you think of it, let me know when that's coming. Maybe we'll go.
I'd like to call the February 3rd, 2026 Town Council meeting to order at 1 p.m. If I could ask everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Clerk, may we please have the roll?
Mayor Bell,
Here.
Mayor Berner,
Here.
Mr. Farrell,
Present.
Ms. Kay,
Here.
Mr. Anderson,
Here.
Ms. Tillerson, here, Mr. McQuillan.
The first item of business is approval of the minutes from our last board meeting, January 6th. I provided the clerk with one minor correction. Any other edits or corrections or comments to the minutes?
I had none.
None. They would be deemed approved with that one correction. Thank you. Citizen comments on agenda items only. Yes, Ms. Gallagher.
Sherry Gallagher, 119 Spartina. Oh, hi, Phil. And I'm also on the KICA board. Today's agenda has the utility services ordinance on it, and we were wondering if that's going to have any impact at all on KICA's agreement with Comcast. Is that meant to apply to it? Might it apply to it?
No, this is, there is a single little provision added to the existing public works section of the code dealing with franchises. This has a very, very limited impact of potentially carving out from its coverage municipally owned or governmentally owned utility. That's all it does.
Because I think when we read the whole ordinance, once we'd been exposed to reading, we were like, oh, whoa, this could potentially, if one
Well,
choose to read it.
The ordinance is already in place.
Right.
So the only thing that's before us today is one very small modification, this carve-out. And
Okay,
we can
but we're
cer-
just alert to that. If, should you choose to go further with it, there's something to worry about in there.
So, Sherry, if I could jump in.
Yeah.
Shannon reached out to me about 2 weeks ago about the Comcast agreement and what's going on with that right now. She and Beverly hosted John Taylor and I to talk about it some more. So we are attuned to it. It's a good concern. I appreciate you bringing it up for the broader awareness.
Okay.
So we're working out some ways to stay in each other's hip pockets as we're mutually moving forward on some things. There's more than telecommunications involved. Jody Forrest also sits on our Infrastructure and Public Works Committee as a mechanism to try to keep all of us in the same boat together. which we hope, nothing's fail-safe or foolproof, but we're trying. For awareness, the mayor's asked us, and we've already been teeing up, doing a franchise ordinance update this year. And so we have a subcommittee formed that's working on that. One of the members is in the room, Phil. And so that will go through the IPWC. If there's somebody other than Jody you want us to work with, that's great, but we've got Jody engaged as those things are coming up.
Thank you. That helps. Thank you.
We're trying to catch it.
Any other citizen comments on agenda items? If not, what is next on the agenda is a presentation regarding the reserve study that the town had engaged in. And John, I believe you have the floor. So are we to assume that you're going to go through every line of every one of the pull-out pages? Kidding, of course. I trust you will be providing a high-level summary.
I will. Thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it. Yeah, I won't be reading
John,
through.
John, just before you
Yeah.
get started, let me provide a little bit of, I guess, background and context.
Sure.
Why we commissioned this work. As we had discussed at some length during our council strategic planning meetings last week, and I had also raised during the town hall the week before, the town has a significant amount of cash reserves, and the question is, what are those monies to be utilized for? And we wanted to, as part of that exercise, to make deciding how to make the appropriate strategic investments and fund a capital improvements plan, we wanted to have a better handle on what the major kind of repair and replacement schedule would be with regard to the town's assets, what would be the potential cost of replacing all our assets if there was a catastrophic event, what would it cost to replace it today? I would just note that this, and I see KICA board member Paul Hennessy chairs the finance committee, was talking about yesterday at some length the KICA board meeting, kind of the reserve and replacement fund for KICA. It's a little bit different for the town. It's a little bit unusual for a town to actually engage in a reserve study. That's typically done by property owner or homeowners associations because they want to understand the amount of assessments that need to be, the amount of the portion of assessments, regular assessments that need to go into fund future replacement and repair of assets of the property owners association. KICA has, for example, 50 miles of roads. They've got bridges, they've got boardwalks, they've got ponds. The town has 3 miles plus of roads, this facility, and a bridge and some vehicles and furnishing and equipment, and that's about it. But nonetheless, we wanted a better idea of what the potential calls on our reserves might be in the future. So this is a little bit different than most municipalities go through, but we thought it was a useful exercise. I'm sorry, John, thank you.
No, that's a great intro. Thanks very much. And a lot of really great points introduced there. My name is John Walker. I'm an engineering manager here at Reserve Advisors. And we specialize in performing reserve studies, most typically for community associations, mid-rise associations, HOAs, and things of this sort. But occasionally we do have the privilege of working with municipalities to assist them with their reserve planning. And so I wanted to briefly discuss two related but different ways of looking at capital assets. And I wanted to focus in on this catastrophic plan that I've built out for you all that really poses or ponders that question of if we had to restore major common area assets all at once in one fiscal year, what's the planning level of cost associated with that? And so this isn't necessarily a prediction that that is going to happen, but I do think it's a helpful benchmark for you all to use in your conversations moving forward. And I think you'll be quite pleased with some of the major takeaways that I'll share. So you all have access to this reserve study. It's, again, over 100 pages, so I will not be discussing each and every part of it, but I do want to share some of my major takeaways related to the town and the reserve status of the town specifically. If you're following along with me, I'm on page 14 of the PDF, and this is our capital planning reserve study. So I'll zoom in a little bit just to give a brief overview here. But as was mentioned, we're mapping out these common components, assigning them a unit cost and a useful life in order to map out over the next 30 years what's going to be the cost of these maintenance or replacement or repair activities for the town. And so that's what a traditional reserve study would look like, associated with a funding plan to ensure that essentially enough money is coming in to fund for these major capital projects like repaving of pavement or roof replacements at the town hall or things of the sort. Now, as our conversations progressed, whereas I think this is a helpful maintenance planning tool for you all, the reserve study in traditional sense, we sort of birthed this addendum to the reserve study, which I think provides a little bit more helpful of a number for you all to work with. And again, we built this plan and this addendum off of existing reserve study data, but dug in a little bit more to that question of, okay, well, instead of just having to replace the roof at the town hall and the siding and the windows and doors, what if we had to rebuild that structure entirely? And so this new plan was born where we're mapping out all those expenditures again, but considering more of a snapshot or catastrophic approach to those of essentially rebuilding this infrastructure if that were ever needed. So this is more of a worst case scenario plan that I think will provide a helpful stress test to your reserve status. My takeaway of this is if you had to, and you can probably see this column that I'm kind of zooming into, this fiscal year 2026, and you can probably see that we're allotting all of these expenditures into one single fiscal year. If all of that worst case scenario, if all of that infrastructure had to be replaced or rebuilt, you're looking at this $34.7 million as a total project cost for that. I want to be really clear about the intended use of this number. It's really, this snapshot is designed to be and designed to support a high level policy discussion for you all. For example, what reserve target makes sense, whether funds should be earmarked for certain things, or whether there's an excess of reserves and maybe what to do with those leftover funds. And so this is not so much of an insurance appraisal or meant to demonstrate insured values of any of these assets. It's just a high level approach to the reserve conversation. And so this number that I present you all with is, again, that snapshot into the catastrophic scenario of having to replace all of the town's common infrastructure in one fiscal year.
So
There
just,
are a lot
just
of-
to press pause if I could on that,
Sure.
John. So as I understand it, that is the current, that's the replacement cost as of today, the replacement cost for all of the town's assets in aggregate. Doesn't have any, no calculation about what is recoverable from insurance and catastrophic events or anything like that. It's simply if we had to bear the cost of our full cost of replacing every one of our town's assets if they were all destroyed tomorrow. This is the estimated cost to do that. And I believe you have it broken down about 16 million for the building, another million or so for interiors, it's about 14 million for the bridge, another kind of 3 million for the roads, and
Yep.
a few $100,000 for vehicles.
That's right.
Okay.
And this is an interesting approach. Obviously, we're taking that reserve study data, using a square footage cost to build out some of these hard costs, and then taking out those reserve study costs so that we're not double counting something like a roof into the reconstruction of the building. So this is a conservative estimate of what it would take to replace all of that infrastructure. There is a lot more data here. If you're curious about picking through, there's additional addendums for beach and storm cleanup, as well as, again, that reserve study in the traditional sense that you all may use for capital planning. But that's my assessment of the dollars that would be needed to essentially fully replace or rebuild the common infrastructure that the town maintains.
But to drill down a little bit, apart from replacement cost, we have a significant amount of remaining life, expected life, on most of our assets.
Yep.
So in terms of, apart from catastrophic, needed capital investment over the next 5 years, there isn't that much associated with our current assets.
That's right.
I would note, I think I'd mentioned on our strategic planning meeting that looked at Isle of Palms as a point of comparison. We have $50 million in cash reserves. Isle of Palms has about the same amount. There are a couple notable differences. One, they're a larger city. They do have a budget that's about twice ours. They have municipal, police department, fire department, et cetera. But the most noteworthy thing is the reason they have those levels of reserves is because they had $40 million of scheduled capital projects within the next 2 years. We don't. They also have debt. Are you Isle of Palms as well?
They've got like several extremely large erosion
Yeah,
projects on
yeah,
the horizon.
yeah.
So can I ask a question, following up from our workshop last week? We talked about cash flowing our capital projects. Would that feed back into this for a revised version of?
The finance director has started that process. She sent me some high-level stuff. I haven't had a chance to focus on it, yes, but
Yeah, I didn't expect you to have it done, but I
yes.
figured it probably contributes.
yes, that's
iterative.
absolutely part of the follow-on from the strategic planning meetings, yes.
Fantastic, thank you.
And I will say, just a professional opinion is the town is in exceptional standing, reserve funding wise. It's seldom that we see a town or a municipality or even HOAs or master associations in this good of a spot. So I kudos to you all, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
So, thank you, John. I mean,
I have
questions? Yeah.
I have a lot of questions. John, I'm the math and engineering guy of the group here. I have to ask a couple questions. Does this analysis take into account what I lovingly call the Kiowa cost markup? I say that because when I'm going through the details in your analysis, you have a line item 1.980 for windows. You have a cost of $122,000. I paid more than that last year for my house to replace the
Okay.
windows. I don't see how that is a real number for replacing all the windows in this facility. So,
Okay.
and that I think is an example of why I'm asking, do you incorporated the Kiowa cost impact?
Yeah, to answer your question a little bit more broadly of how we derive these unit costs, we have a national database of construction costs. You may be familiar with RS Means or
I'm very familiar
CostWorks.
with it, yeah.
Yeah, as a starting point for a lot of these costs, I think what our engineering firm does quite well is factoring in local costs that we see in the Kiowa area or more broadly the Charleston area. And so we aim to account for those fluctuations in cost. Dorota provided me with a lot of great historical costs for some of your repaving projects or bridge repairs in which I did see that pretty consistently that you all were experiencing unit costs that were in excess of what I would typically allot for those projects. And so we did our best to adjust for those. I think part of the conversation here is also that we're inflating these costs. A project like Windows is a great one because we're aiming to inflate that cost over a 30-year scope. And so trying not to go too high on those unit costs in 2026 dollars, because then essentially we'll be looking at 10x or 11x project costs when those eventually get replaced, way out in 2050. So to answer your question, yes, we do our best to aim to incorporate those price increases because that's what we've seen pretty consistently for the historical costs that have been provided. But if there are specific items that you still perceive to be lower or that for sure are lower, then you and I can certainly engage and alter some of those costs. I will be transparent that I think that a helpful comparison point is this percentage of future expenditures, where we're aiming to describe how much does this particular common element really weigh into these conversations. And so a lot of the times, the things that are really moving the needle are the repaving projects of which we were provided historical data for, and less so some of these more cosmetic or even town hall expenditure. So just to put this conversation in perspective.
Okay, so,
If I just would just
I
make
have
one
one
other
more.
observation. Apart from the specific line items as to whether they kind of line up with expectations, it does strike me, you might have a different view, that his overall replacement cost for this building, a number in the aggregate, seems to be what one might think in the ballpark relative to the cost of this, which was, the actual hard construction cost 7 million or so? 7 million, how many years ago, and what we know about the expected cost of the addition, and this is a little bit larger.
I understand that. I have RS means at my house, and I used to use it when I first moved here, and the costs are historically much lower. They have an adjustment factor for Charleston, but they do not have an adjustment factor for Kiowa.
Sure.
And the costs on Kiowa are not as high as they should be because of that. But I have a couple of other things that I looked at in here. The road cost is not nearly high enough. The distance is about 3 miles from here to the front gate. 3 miles times 5,280 feet per mile times 24 feet wide, divided by 9 square yards per 9 square feet per square yard, comes up with 42,000 square yards, which is almost double of what you have of 26,000 square yards. So I think your cost for the road repairs are off. And I say that in addition because on page 4.36, you reference that the Kiowa Island Parkway, that span that I just talked about, which is 3 miles long, give or take, was repaved in 1998 at a cost of 900 thou. That's, I don't know, it's almost 30 years ago. You have in the cost of 805,000 today, which is not possible, because the cost of paving is going to be very sensitive to the price of oil. In 1998, the price of oil was $20 a barrel. Today, it's in the 60s, which makes sense because in 30 years, I would have expected ballpark the $900,000 figure from 1998 would triple, which is more of what I'm thinking would be the case for the paving. So I think that also is something that needs to be addressed. In addition, I noticed that you have an addendum B, which is for beach and storm cleanup. I'm not sure how this model was supposed to be prepared, but in calendar year 2026, or fiscal year 2026, you don't have any dollars in there for any storm cleanup, which I don't think is reasonable. And then I note that table shows every other year it's 0, which I don't think that's reasonable either, because I think we're always going to have beach cleanup every single year. So
Sure.
I think that is something that needs to be looked at. And the last question is how have, and you may not be able to do it, but how do you account for a contingency for additional price escalation for the oil market in general? The price of paving is so dependent upon what's happening in the oil industry. And I just know, so I had a lot of construction clients. So I went back and looked at my rates in 2017, which is just before I retired. The cost of a ton of asphalt was $330 a ton. Today, it's almost double that at $600 a ton, which is an example of how volatile asphaltic prices are, which then flow into also things that are just basic construction elements, such as shingles and things of that nature. So how do you account for the risk of future price fluctuations if something goes severely wrong in the world?
Yeah, great question. A couple notes there. I didn't have access to that specific bid for that project that was done back in 1998, but it was my understanding, based on the materials provided, that there was a good bit of other work that was involved in the scope of that repaving project, that it was not just a typical mill or even total replacement of those roadways. So that elevated unit cost to me, I partially attributed to other, I think, swale work that was done in addition to that project. But I'll go back and double check that figure, because I understand your concern that how could a unit cost now be lower than it was 20 years ago. So I can double check that. Secondly, your question about pavement is a really good one, and how to account for fluctuations. And the first thing I want to say is our recommendation for these reserve study materials is to have them updated on a somewhat regular basis. We typically recommend them getting updated every 3 to 5 years. Some associations or some municipalities prefer to have them updated on an annual basis. That could provide better insights to the fluctuation in those unit costs, getting them updated more frequently, because we're constantly updating our numbers. Things like vinyl siding and fiber cement siding have doubled in the past 4 or 5 years. So
Right.
getting these studies updated, I think, is one defense against that. Secondly, and this is in the interest of full transparency, there is no way for me to crystal ball exactly where these cost fluctuations are going to go necessarily. I think how we defend against that the best is by allowing for buffers in these reserve plans. So in a traditional sense, when we say the municipality is going to spend X in a certain year, we're oftentimes leaving a buffer zone of about 20% of remaining reserve cash at the end of that fiscal year, to account for any scenario in which we estimated a certain pavement project to be X, and then the project ends up being 1.2X. You're never going to be going into the red as far as your reserve balance goes, because we are leaving a little bit of a threshold at the end of each one of these years. That being said, it is our mission to get as close as we can to those unit costs. So I don't want to punt completely on that question, but in an effort to account for some of that variability and that fluctuation that can't necessarily be predicted, we aim to leave you all with a threshold at the end of each one of those fiscal years to account for that.
All right,
So
thank you, John.
I have a question. How long has it been since we did the last one of these studies?
Never done one.
We've
Never.
never did one of
And
the
John, what
studies.
would you recommend the time span between studies? What's the optimal time span?
The Community Associations Institute that we typically are in line with recommend every 3 to 5 years. I think it says on the front page of this report, a better fit might be more in the 2 to 3 year range. But again, it's not uncommon for communities of this scale to update these studies on an annual basis. So it really just depends. But I would say, to answer your question, within 5 years is ideal to get these studies updated.
Although
What
I
does it
wonder,
cost?
sorry.
What does it cost?
It was only like five, seven. Yeah, I think it was under
This
7,000.
study cost $6,400?
Under 7,000.
I just wonder if maybe it's also event-driven, because we are doing that cash flow study, because we have a lot of capital projects coming up. So perhaps when that's completed, it might be, at least to revisit part of this, it might be worth doing.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Can I just, I can probably answer this question. You did ask a question, and just for clarification, you had talked about storm cleanup and saying that we probably will have something in this year. So with this, and you were questioning why it wasn't showing up in the study. So the numbers that you were looking at was for fiscal year '26, which is from July 1, 2025 to June 30th, 2026. So for '27, he does show cleanup, which starts July 1, 2026. So on that page where it
All right,
says
so I understand
something-
that, so the fiscal
Yeah.
year, I understand
So
that.
there is something showing for this year. It's
Okay,
under 2027.
but it's still every other year at zero,
Yeah, but I was just referring
which
to,
doesn't
yeah.
make sense.
Right.
This was really focused on beach renourishment and post-storm cleanup, which we actually haven't had any of either of those. in several years, and we actually hope we don't. We do have a beach renourishment fund, but was reflected in there, and we had discussions with Mr. Walker about this, is at least to identify the cost of the most expensive beach renourishment project that's ever been undertaken by the town, which is a little less than $1 million, and the most expensive incidents of post-storm cleanup, which was cut and toss that the town is responsible for.
No, I understand what you're doing. I mean, when I've done things like this in the past, it would be, we used to call it an investment vulnerability assessment, and you would then wait, how likely is a hurricane to come through here? And you would come up with a percentage adjustment of that cost, and then use that as a contingency. You don't take the entire amount, like say it was gonna be $100,000 to clean up after a storm, you would take 25% of that. Understanding you have to account for enough of these investment risks so that if 1 in 10 come in, which is reasonable, then you're covered.
So absolutely agree, 110% from kind of a reserving or planning standpoint. This, I think, goes to show that the most expensive beach renourishment project that's ever been undertaken is $872,000, yet we have, you know, how many million dollars in our beach renourishment fund? Yet your analysis suggests we only need kind of a fraction of that, and then you build that up over time. We are way over that. We're way over that in storm cleanup right now.
Okay. But I'm just using, so, I mean, so what happens with these, so let me ask a bigger question to Dorada. Dorada, I'm sorry, what do we do with a value that's in a reserve bucket and we don't spend it that year? What happens to it? It stays in the investment account?
Correct, and it just earns interest on it.
Okay, all right, so, okay, all right, thank you.
And again, this gets to the uniqueness even of undertaking the reserve study. The reason that HOAs do, property owners associations, because basically their only source of revenue is in, you know, collecting regular assessments from their members or imposing special assessments. And in order to kind of plan, you'll do a reserve study to say, okay, here's the anticipated depreciation or the time that you would need to replace or repair these major assets owned. And what we recommend, the reserve study will say that you set aside 15 to 20% of annual assessments to fund the reserve fund. So hopefully there's enough in the reserve so as to avoid a special assessments. Occasionally special assessments are necessary. With a municipality, there's a reason a lot of municipalities don't have reserves at all, is because they can raise taxes, they can borrow money, they have all sorts of different potential revenue sources.
Okay.
So, I mean, we went through this exercise because of everything, because we have this pool and we're trying to figure out, make smart decisions about what is available to strategically invest or not. And it highlights, I think, at least my takeaway is that, you know, we do have more than enough reserved for each of these component parts, just like for the building, I mean, or your own home. You don't set aside enough cash in order to replace the cost of that if it gets.
Right, but this assessment study to me is what we should be setting aside for maintenance or perhaps renovations of things that fail. Using the windows as an example, at some point, we're going to have to replace the windows.
Absolutely.
So this then helps identify the amount of cost that needs to be put aside.
And that's kind of what the process is going to be undertaken, is that we've got some major potential capital projects or uses of reserve funds that are kind of one-time significant hits, whether we finance those or not. But we do want to figure out when, and that's why a lot of this is kind of useful life stuff.
Oh, it is.
When do we need to actually replace systems in this building?
And this is exactly the kind of cash model that we're looking at doing for the potential other projects, because this is demonstrating how much money you need to set aside based on the life cycle or the life expectancy of the roof shingles, the walls, the siding, the windows, whatever it may be.
And the fact of the matter is that, for better or for worse, and it's a little unusual, is the town, other than the building, constructing of this building itself, I believe every single capital project has been paid out of operating revenues, and never had to tap into any reserves, which again is just extraordinarily fortunate
It
position
is,
to be in.
certainly is.
The only thing I'd add, I mean, you guys have covered a lot of ground. The only thing I'd add is, we have almost 29 million in unrestricted reserves today. It's earning 3.75% to 4% every year. And so we're in great shape already. And then the second thing is, and as the mayor pointed out very early on, most of our assets are covered by replacement value insurance. So this gives us a sense of, if you X out those things, it gives you a sense of what's not covered by reserves or insurance, which is basically the roads.
Right,
That's-
but a
that's
lot
the
of
big
this,
deal.
a lot of this is for replacement though, of things as they age out. And this is very useful for determining how much needs to be set aside for replacing.
And I take your point. There's a bunch of numbers in here that I thought were low or high, or some were good. But it's a baseline for us to start with. And I think my expectation is that we would do this again, kind of in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, me too.
Just like we would do other things we started doing in 2
Yeah,
or 3
we
years.
should.
Luke, or Dorota, does our insurance do an appraisal for what that replacement value is? Yes. And do these all jive?
Yes, every couple of years they send an appraiser, and we just had it done last year.
Oh.
And just to remind you, for the property, our deductibles are very low. Like for this building, it's $3,000. For vehicles, it's $500.
Which is another thing we probably ought to look at to see if our deductible was, instead of 3,000, was 100,000, what will we save in insurance costs? So that's, there's a bunch of stuff rolling around here that all helps us get more focused on where are we spending our money and what's the value we're getting for our buck.
Any other questions? John, if you're still there, thank you for this. This is a useful exercise for us to go through. I think
Yes,
we're all
I agree.
learning something, and this will kind of factor into the ongoing analysis of reserves, use of reserves, cash flows, expected cash flows over the next 1 to 5 and 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, we need to do this again in 3 years or so.
Okay. Thank you again
Good.
very much, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you all very much. Talk soon.
Next on the agenda is updates from council members. I'll begin and probably start with the events of this weekend. I mean, we were very fortunate to not be adversely impacted by snow and ice on Kiowa Island. That's not to say that there weren't adverse impacts. Unfortunately, about 1,000 properties experienced a power outage on Sunday afternoon, which took several hours to resolve. It was resolved in serial fashion. Stephanie, I'm not sure how much insight you can provide. Stephanie was in regular communication with BEC, Berkeley Electric. During that, we were at the KICA board meeting yesterday and noted that Ed Monahan, I had a chance to talk with Ed, was on site with Berkeley Electric out in the field almost the entirety of that day. Some issue with a cable that was, apparently somewhat storm related, and then the process of putting the system back online required something called backfeeding, which I don't quite understand. Stephanie, I don't know if you, but it was in serial fashion. I think some homes were back on, after 3 hours, but others it took a full 7 hours.
Yeah.
But anything that you can add, and I anticipate that the Infrastructure and Public Works Committee, Councilmember Spencer, will be taking a good look at this at its next meeting and reaching out to BEC.
He's already did
Yeah.
that. So I just want to I've been, just like the mayor said, when this event happened and I noticed it on Kiowa, I immediately reached out to Bert, who is our contact with Berkeley Electric Co-op, and asked kind of what's going on. Thankfully, he responded right away. He was in communications with the engineer and the VP, so he was constantly giving me feedback. as well as I didn't realize that Ed Monahan was also actually on site. So this is what Berkeley Electric told me. The outage was confirmed as a cable failure. Berkeley Electric believes that that failure was most likely due to essentially the cold weather. The system was under heavy load at the time, which contributed to the cable going out. Where I live on Johns Island, I was getting messages from Berkeley Electric saying, please lower your temperature by 3 degrees, everyone, to help with the load. So they believe that it was the cause of cold weather and the cable failing. Berkeley Electric restored power through a process called backfeeding. It's when a circuit fails and the repair would take time. Crews, they had 5 crew members, I believe, out here. Crews reroute power through other infrastructure circuits that are still operational. Essentially, they find a second connection to deliver power around the affected area. So it takes time to essentially bring up, they're doing this manually, and so it does take a little time. On Kiowa, they were able to do this in sections using two-way feeds. Berkeley Electric Co-op tries to always have a second power source available, but activating it requires opening switches and coordinating significant crew and engineering resources. Once power is restored through the alternate route, crews return the next day to address the underlying problem. The example that they gave me, just in terms of backfeeding, because some who's not engineers or even understand this, like me, I had to have them kind of use kind of dummies for engineering purposes. But they told me, think of it like a road closure. When the main road is blocked, traffic gets rerouted through side streets until the road can be repaired. Berkeley Electric did the same thing with our power. When the cable failed, their crews rerouted everything through other lines to get power back, and while they addressed the damaged cable. That's what backfeeding is. Going forward, because I asked them about that, they said that they had a plan in place for this year to replace all the cables, but unfortunately, they were trying to be proactive, but because of the cold weather, they were scrambling to try to get that cable repaired. But they expect the work to begin soon. I'll let Councilmember Spencer, because I know you had sent an email requesting someone from Berkeley Electric to come to the Infrastructure Public Works Committee to essentially be able to, you had a lot more intelligent and more
Thanks.
direct questions.
And what you're sharing was really helpful. And I'll preface with, I am an electrical engineer, so I have a lot of questions about why this didn't happen based off of reports they've given us in prior IPWCs about automating the system and investment they've already made to prevent these things from happening, and then it's happening still. So there's a lot of questions that I think we'll dig in with them on. The 2 questions specifically asked them to be able to address at our next meeting is, one, the outage cause, lessons learned, what kind of fixes they're going to put in the system and process, things like that, to give us the assurance that they understand the problem, it won't happen again, or the likelihood of it happening again is reduced. I do question why, especially with low populations, a properly sized system. We have cold weather here sometimes. It should be sized for this, in my opinion. So we'll ask them some tough questions about that and see where that goes. The second question was about, there's been a lot of conversation on IKEA about 3 times power bills for unoccupied homes, damage to HVAC equipment and other things from an apparent power surge, and asked them to be able to address that as well. The initial response was, can you give us dates and times? And I'm like, no, not really. I mean, I probably could find it, but I have the anecdotal from IKEA, but I would hope that they would have a better understanding if they have surges in their system. They should have the proper monitoring equipment to know when that's happening. And they did say they've addressed with individual homeowners the bill adjustments or the bill increases, but I'd like to know more systemically why they're having those problems. We will look further into this and try to understand what they're up to.
So let me ask
What
a
you and
question.
I talked about, I'm sorry.
I had, so I understand the failure, and it was suggested that it was because of temperature. But this was during the day when, kind of the middle of the day, and I was affected. I would have expected the load to be as high as it would be in the summertime when everybody's got their air conditioning on. So
Great point.
something doesn't sound right to me.
You're right.
And then the second question is, I'd like to know, being an engineer also, like many of us, was it a cable failure? Did the cable melt, or do they have breakers? And did the breaker trip?
And why doesn't it automatically reroute? Why don't they have switching like that they could do it remotely? Because they
I can
indicated they
sort of
do.
understand that, once you get it down, but, kind of, if it's load shedding, they should have automatic load shedding. Maybe they don't have automatic load shedding. But the story about it happening because it's cold, and most people are using propane for heat, or a lot of folks are using propane for heat. And during the day, again, it wasn't so cold as it would have been during the nights, where you get your auxiliary heat come on, that little plus that's on your thermostat. Like our auxiliary heat strips, I know were not on when this happened, so
Those are
I'd
great
like more
points.
information, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you and I discussed, Lance, that building on what Mr. Farrell said and what the mayor has said last month, there's a lot of development remaining to be constructed. Some big users are coming online. How are we going to be feeding power to them if we already have a problem?
Yeah, that's a great point also, and we'll ask and inquire about that too. This won't be a one and done meeting, I'm sure. I'm sure they'd like it to be.
And one of the things we should discuss is, should we slow down, stop construction permits until this gets resolved?
That's a great point, or the limitations, absolutely. I'll cover this quickly because it relates. What? So the mayor's asked us, and we have been teeing up in the IPWC, revisiting our franchise agreements and our franchise ordinance. And I mentioned before, we've got a subcommittee, and Phil's part of it, that is taking the initial draft ordinance that our town attorneys put together, and we're going to robust it. That's not the right word. We're going to make sure we've got the considerations in there that the committee recommends, and then pass it back up to council with recommendations. These are the great kinds of things to factor in what kind of accountability went through franchise ordinances and agreements that we want accountability on. A resident recommended to the mayor and I yesterday that we look at bringing in third parties to look over the shoulder of our utility providers and do assessments on behalf of the town. And the discussion we had offline was, and the utility company should pay for it, not us. So, building those kinds of things in, that's, an expectation doing business in Key Island. So we're at a good juncture to incorporate those things in on a set of clean documents that should help us with that kind of stuff.
Thank you, and I know you'll have some other infrastructure-related updates in your update, Councilmember Spencer. A couple of other things. So we were talking about the reserve study and capital projects. The largest capital project that will have ever been undertaken by the town, exceeding this one, is the Civic and Cultural Center. Just to provide a brief update to everyone regarding that, we discussed this at some length in the strategic planning meeting. Work is about begin to accelerate. What's been done thus far is basically the site diligence process. So what the surveying's been completed, locating services, all that work's been completed, geotech and soil testing, and then there's been wastewater solution assessment, and I'm going to touch upon that in a little bit more detail later on. But we will anticipate going out this week with an RFQ to solicit indications of interest for construction managers at risk for the project. And so we'll put out the RFQ. Again, this is just to solicit indications of interest. The building committee, which I'll touch upon in a minute, will then review those, interview those firms, put out an RFP, and invite some of those firms, probably 3 to 4 of those firms, to participate in the RFP process. So, in the next, month or so, we'll really start beginning to crystallize this with some early conceptual designs, and then, begin to hone in on how this process is going to move forward. One of the action items is the appointment of the committee, and what the charter provides for. It's not really required by our ordinance, but the committee's charter that we approved is the mayor shall appoint the committee members with the council's consent. I have determined 5 committee members of the committee to appoint. And I hope if there is no objection, that council will consent to those. If there is any objection, we can bring it up to the next council meeting for formal consideration, but discussing it with the town attorney. If there is no objection, that will be deemed consent. But the members would be basically 4 carryover members of the committee members who were involved with the design competition, myself, Councilmember Berner with his engineering expertise, Mark Kamens with his architectural expertise, David Wool, who's the chair of the Arts Council, has been involved in a number of Culture and Arts Center facility projects, and the final member of the committee to bring us some commercial construction experiences is Rob Glass, who may be known to some of the KICA board member. He's on the KICA Amenities Committee, but he spent 4 decades in the commercial construction space, primarily in steel construction, and has a civil engineering degree from NC State. So we think he'll be a great addition and round out the committee. So if there's no objection, those would be the 5 council committee members that I will have appointed. We will have to start getting to work later this month on things. Any questions or comments about that? Then the one other thing we did discuss in strategic planning, again, given the cost associated with this, is to, the most efficient, effective way to finance this. And Councilmember Farrell has volunteered to lead the effort to figure out whether we're going to, get bank financing, issue debt, or how best to finance our outflow. That does a little bit of a spillover into the strategic planning meeting we had last week. And if anybody has a free 7 hours, I think, available, and that they, are bored to tears, and we spent about 7 hours over the course of 2 days.
On the first day.
What's that?
On the first day.
It seemed like that. It wasn't quite that. Going over a wide range of issues. I'm not going to summarize everything associated with that, but a lot of action items that were coming out of that. We spent a lot of time at the beginning talking on some of these finance-related issues. Council member Kay is looking at leading an effort to try to figure out if we need to have more focused staff resources focused on resiliency-related issues. We had a presentation from CARDA, one of the top executives with the Charleston Area Regional Transit Association Authority, to talk about regional transit issues. There's been some discussion of getting public transportation along Maybank. There is none on Johns Island right now, and if so, can it be brought all the way down to either this town hall or Freshfields Village? And there's a desire, I think, to bring a number of different stakeholders together. Community stakeholders would be KICA, it would be the resort, it would be the club, and others, to try to figure out if there's an appetite for public transportation, whether employees, guests, and visitors would take advantage of it. And we'd probably have to collaborate on some last mile service provision, because we assume that there would not be a high appetite for having the public buses just transiting around Kiowa Island, so probably drop off here, and there might have to be some shared transit solution amongst the key stakeholders here if there is sufficient interest. But that's going to be a broader discussion. We'll try to facilitate that. We talked about, I'll come on inlet relocation in a minute. Already talked about the franchise agreements, an update on cell towers, which I think we'll hear from Councilmember Spencer in a minute. One of the key agenda items that we discussed, that there will now be a work group. I think they met for the first time today. Okay, is taking a fresh look at issues related to short-term rentals on Kiowa Island. There are really 2 or 3 prongs to it. One is whether or not we want to revisit decisions that were made in the past with regard to short-term rental caps on Kiowa Island. I use that term, using quotes, air quotes, because I think a lot of people are under the mistaken impression that there is an overall cap on short-term rentals on Kiowa Island. There is not. There are caps in specific neighborhoods or specific districts. There's not an overall cap. And we have a relatively high percentage of our residential dwelling units, well more than 30%, that have short-term rental licenses on them, which is a pretty high for this type of community. And, are there capacity issues that are worth discussing in that regard? Is continued growth in the short-term rental population something that is appropriate for this island? Do we want to think about alternative strategies? And then there are other issues related to our short-term rental alliance as to specific provisions. One issue that had been discussed is individual property owners are held to account for rental violations, and they may lose their own business license. But is the issue less with the individual property than with the property management company and their oversight of the property? And are they feeling any pain if they're mismanaging properties, or is the pain simply being felt by an individual property owner? So those are the kinds of issues. I mean, you guys can certainly, if you want to shed any light on your discussions today, but that's, I think, the types of issues you'll be looking at going forward.
Well, 100%. We're just basically trying to set up and get coordinated for the initial kickoff meeting. No decisions were made.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. No votes taken. We were just getting ready to kick it off.
We also had a lot of discussion about a potential Kiowa Greenbelt Fund, similar to the county's Greenbelt Fund, to invest in or contribute to or support conservation efforts. That effort's going to be led by Councilmember Spencer, and I don't know if other council members, I can't recall if there were others, were going to be involved in that process.
Luke will have a big role.
And then also, one of the key recommendations of the Planning Commission that got embedded in Kiowa Next, or Comprehensive Plan, was the establishment of a Kiowa Island Alliance that would involve key stakeholders on Kiowa Island. Certainly kind of the maze of caves, but you would go beyond that. For example, Edens, since they are a key stakeholder for the town of Kiowa Island. And Stephanie and I will be working on that and reaching out to each of the key island stakeholders about, at least starting with the idea of a quarterly meeting to discuss cross-entity, cross-organizational issues, and stay tuned for that. The last item I want to touch upon right now is I got I think it was a question from somebody in the audience at my town hall meeting with the community a little over a week ago. But there'd also been the subject of a lot of IKEA back and forth, and that's with regard to the notice that went out from the Army Corps of Engineers with regard to a potential inlet relocation on Captain Sam Spit. I just want to allay the community's concerns about what that entailed and what it doesn't. The Army Corps of Engineers has permitting approval with regard to any navigable waterway. The Kiowa River is that, and the inlet cut is that. But what the application involves is not just that navigable waterway where it is, but it would involve work on Kiowa Island, on Captain Sam Spit, within the municipal boundaries of the town, and on property owned not by the applicant. So, just to be clear, the Army Corps of Engineers could permit this. That doesn't mean that authorizes anybody to undertake any work. That's a necessary step if there ever is to be an inlet relocation, but it's not a sufficient step. At the end of the day, no project will be done without the town's approval. We've recently enacted a number of provisions, our beach management ordinance, which, for example, require no inlet relocation or shoreline adjustment without the town's approval, without any alteration of the dunes, without the town's approval. can't have vehicles on the beach without the town's approval. Land disturbance permit would require the town's approval. The fact of the matter is that the town had acceded to or approved inlet relocations in the past, and there may have been very valid reasons to do that. We simply haven't begun to undertake that assessment. We will take a complete assessment, be a lengthy one involving public hearings, multiple committees and others. We're a long way from that. We haven't received any formal application from SEPOA, which is a Seabrook Island Properties Owners Association, who submitted the application to the U.S. Army Corps. I will note that the town administrator did have a conversation, reached out to the Army Corps. I participated in some of that, and I think it was clear. I want to be careful, but I think there was a lack of awareness on the part of the Army Corps about certain issues, changes in ordinances in the town, as well as the pending litigation regarding ownership of the spit, and whether that is going to influence their processing of the application or not, I think remains to be seen. But again, just to be clear, nothing can happen without the town's ultimate approval of this process, and that's a long way off.
Can I add one quick thing
Yes.
to that? Only because it was a concern that was raised in several of the talk tracks. The application said that the town had been engaged in January 2025. I think that was very misleading.
Well, it was a bit of an overstatement. The SEPOA had reached out to me, and I sat down with them for about an hour, 90 minutes, more than a year ago now. And that was it. They said, we'd love to do another inlet relocation at some point in time and hope to submit an application. And I said, we'd look forward to receiving it. We had a little back and forth, but that was the extent of it. I believe they also said they had engaged with Kika. What the extent of that engagement was, I don't know. It was a briefing. Yeah, okay. And it's kind of the same thing. It was not really engagement. It was simply a briefing on what they hoped to do. And they gave me some history on the past inlet relocations, but that's about it. Again, it's a little bit odd that you have a applicant applying unilaterally for work to be done on property it doesn't own in another municipal jurisdiction.
Waste of taxpayers' money.
But it is what it is right now, so to be continued. With that, I will turn it over to Councilmember Berner.
Thank you. I'll be quick because it's already 2 o'clock. I just wanted to let the community know that our safety director, Craig Harris, did a marvelous job. I was on many a phone call with him because of this pending storm with the players here in the island, as well as the state players or actors. He did a marvelous job representing the town and making sure that we were properly prepared for the storm that ultimately didn't come. So I just wanted to get that shout out to Mr. Harris, was he did a great job. The other thing that I worked on with the help of the fire department, the fire department ran a mock tabletop exercise with the Community Emergency Response Team to look for the weak links in our communications, and we found them. We did 2 mocks. One was a chemical spill at Night Heron Pool. The other one was a tornado that came in that had downed trees throughout the island. And those 2 events showed us where we need to step up our communications, which we're working on. And we'll follow up with another mock drill in probably 2 months or so ago. But I just wanted to let you know, we spent a lot of time on that. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Kay.
Okay, I have a couple things to talk about. First, we've had the kickoff of Kiowa Conversations, which is our educational program that will focus on topics of the environment, resiliency, sustainability, and wildlife. We had our first Kiowa Conversations last Thursday, and it was focusing on some fairly esoteric turtle patrol information. But it was extremely well attended. We had over 100 people. For our kickoff event, we really didn't anticipate that we'd have that kind of response. So that was particularly gratifying. And then this Thursday, we are having a joint program with Our World and Kiowa Conversations, and it features Erin Givens. Erin, are you? No. Well, our bird expert, Erin, is going to be doing the presentation here at Town Hall this Thursday, and we already have 160 people who have signed up. So the community response to this particular event's been really gratifying and has really reflected the community's interest in learning more about these topics. So we're thrilled with that. We've got a off-site visit to the North Charleston Recycling Center that's coming up next month. We've also got a presentation that Stephanie has put together on strand feeding, which will be in the middle of next month. So we've got a whole agenda of different topics relating to those resiliency issues that we'll be presenting. You're all invited to attend, and we're really pleased because one element of this initiative is to not just include folks from Kiowa. We're reaching out to folks from Seabrook and from Lower Johns Island, inviting them to attend. And we hope to kind of reestablish Kiowa's leadership position in these types of initiatives. So thanks to those on the committee. I see at least one of them here in the audience.
And I'm certainly humbled by the fact that the week before, we had a town hall meeting. We know, at least I know where I am in the pecking order, turtles and birds are a lot harder, about 3x the audience for turtles and birds.
But you had competition. Then moving on to, all right, I'll take the win. Moving on to pest control companies, we've got a meeting set up for this month, the 19th, a lunchtime meeting where we're going to be meeting with everybody who does, all the pest control companies who do business on the island here to try to further investigate what are the issues surrounding the increased use of SGAs and what can we do together to finally turn the trend around. That where we've been seeing reduced numbers of bobcats. And then the other important program that we've got going on with respect to bobcats is that Jim and his team have received permission from many property owners across the island, representing many different pest control companies that they're using. And we will be going out and testing the chemicals that are in those pest control boxes to try to determine where the use of SGAs is coming from, if anywhere, and then take action depending on those findings. We also did a combined meeting with Lance's group, with the infrastructure team and the resiliency team, meeting with the folks from Weston and Sampson who are going to be undertaking the stormwater standards project. And we got in on the ground floor on this one because we wanted to ensure that those areas that were really important to both Lance's team, also to Russ's folks, and to my committees were getting input at the very beginning of the project, that all of the various areas of work that we wanted to see included were included in that project write-up. And then finally, and I'm opening this up to everybody up here on the dais, the meeting yesterday, the KICA board meeting, talked about the ARB. We've had the establishment of our own design review group now to handle those properties that the town is responsible for. Given the fact that KICA is holding a very significant meeting on Thursday to gain public input onto all matters relating to the ARB, I thought it would be helpful to touch base with you guys to kind of determine if any of our perspectives have changed now that we've seen the MOU, we've had a chance to digest some of the issues that have been identified, some of the timelines. I'm wondering about your perspectives on this particular issue. Maybe we can help present a clear picture to the folks. Thank all three of you from the KICA board who are here in attendance today. Brad, I'm going to start with you.
I think a very helpful question and useful to tee that up, and very timely given the discussion yesterday at KICA's board meeting and the upcoming workshop. And as you will all recall, but just to reset for the community, when we approved the DRB, we specifically discussed and included a provision with regard to the potential revisiting of the scope of the town's DRB, depending on what transpired with regard to the transition of Architectural Review Authority from Kiowa Partners to KICA. And I had a couple conversations with a couple KICA board members and other community members asking kind of, well, what now? And just speaking myself, not really able to answer that at this juncture, because as Board Chair Kevin Donlin noted yesterday, what's been circulated is a non-binding memorandum of understanding. It is not even a draft definitive agreement at this juncture.
And there's a 60-day window on moving that forward.
Yes. What the devil's always in the details on these kinds of things, and there's some fairly high-level questions regarding to the structure and the phasing. Fairly high level on the phasing right now. So I think we're just going to have to, at least from my perspective, wait and see what comes out of, what evolves further from that process in terms of what KICA is going to onboard. And over what type of time frame and what's the structure around all of that. And then I think we'd come back and kind of, as we said, reevaluate what the scope of application of the town's design review board authority is. I mean, be mindful of the fact that KICA would only have the authority that's transferred from Kiowa Partners, that is the authority that exists under Article 2 of the general covenants that applies to those covered properties. So in any event, it would not include anything outside of the island proper, would not include Freshfields Village. It would not include other properties that were excluded from the coverage of the general covenant, some of those on Eugenia. I don't know exactly whether there are others, whether there are additional carve-outs in what is ultimately agreed to and transferred or not, I guess it remains to be seen. For example, one of the things in the MOU said it defined new construction, but it defined new construction to exclude anything that the ARB had previously looked at. And what exactly that entails, for example, Upper Beach Walk or other things, we simply don't know at this juncture. So to be continued. At the end of the day, I think, as I said, it's my own personal view, it doesn't make sense to have kind of two full de novo reviews over the same type of construction going forward. I don't think that's anybody's interest. So let's figure out what is the most efficient way to achieving the objectives of the association and the town and broader community interest in a review process. That's my view.
Yeah, I was actually called by Chairman Kevin Donlin on Saturday to talk about this, and it was my first chance to talk to him about it. While I had concerns about the ARB transfer, my bigger concerns were really about gate access for Orange Hill residents. And I listened to the rationale, and I listened to his comments about what they were receiving for that access, and I'm still digesting that. But I think I'm going to come to the point where I have some serious concerns about kind of the consideration that KICA or the members or the island residents receive for any gate access. I'm still not sure what the form of that access should take and what should be allowed or required. He talked about some zoning issues and some construction and some property transfer things that were possible that I think he was under assuming some maybe non-factual information or incorrect information. So as Brad said, there's a lot of devil in the details. So for me, there's still a lot of questions that I would like to ask, and still a lot of questions that I think are unanswered, even from the Kika board side. So I think this meeting on Thursday will be great to maybe talk through some of those things. There's a lot in there, and for me personally, having done a lot of work with bankruptcy and other types of financial agreements, my experience is when you throw a bunch of stuff into that are disparate issues and completely separating those issues out is better. So doing it as maybe 2 or 3 different pieces, 2 or 3 different MOUs is better than doing it in one MOU where you're confusing stuff, you're double counting things, and it's not clear what the intent of A, B, or C is. Where if you separate them out, it becomes a lot cleaner and a lot more effective in decision-making and valuation determination. So I appreciate you asking the question, but there's a lot left to be unearthed for me as far as I'm concerned.
I think Orange Hill is an issue that is an open question for a lot of the community. Do you guys have other stuff to say?
I do. I'm not going to repeat anything. I do have questions with respect to how Orange Hill is going to be administered, but that's going to be Kika's thing. Where I see this headed is, at a minimum, perhaps the town will only be administering the commercial properties at Freshfield. I see that as a foregone. A couple of key things. Kevin also contacted me last week, and we had a very great conversation. What I like about the MOU so far is with respect to the Kiowa real estate building. I really like the MOU stating words to the effect that Kika will have the right of first refusal of any purchase of that building, which is great. And if somehow they need additional financing or fundings, perhaps Kika and the town can work together such that that KRE building or the land stays within our control rather than some other independent third party. I like that idea a lot. The other big thing is with respect to the gate access, and I stressed to Kevin, is that we need to work together. The design, of course, of what's going to happen to the gate is unknown, but what we as a town know, and what I informed Kevin of, is that there is a maze of utilities at that intersection. And I informed him that we looked at going through a road widening a year or so ago to make a right turn only lane down Beach Walker, and quickly learned, unfortunately, that it would take $1 million just by itself to move the utilities out of the way just to put in the lane. That's got nothing to do with the other civil construction. It's just to get the utilities out of the way. So I brought that up to Kevin's attention so that doesn't get overlooked in whatever kind of overall deal, if you will, is made with the partners. But I'm real happy to see a first step with the MOU, and I'm looking forward to where it ends up.
And likewise, I won't repeat what has already been said, and I agree with pretty much everything that was said. I also talked with Kevin at length. I echo your concern about the utilities at the gate. I also raised that. I don't think the attention of what kind of problem that could cause is accounted for properly yet, having done a lot of utilities installation and relocations and things like that, especially when we have very poor as-builts and very poor understanding of what's really in there. I think that could easily grow, and I think it could result in operational outages and things like that, which happens a lot with that kind of stuff. And so I think we really need to be eyes wide open with that. My sentiment on the real estate building is a little different, but I think that, and I appreciate Kevin reaching out, and I'm very mindful of what's the association's roles in this versus the town's roles, and I appreciate the outreach because I felt like that was a really good first step to, engage us and at least get our thoughts. I shared with him, I said, I've got a lot of views, depends on what role you're asking me in. Are you asking me from the town or from a membership perspective? I'll answer from the town perspective because that's why he called me. But I think that anything that has to do with what I called to him the DMZ there, we really need to be tied at the hip. In my meeting with Shannon and Beverly, we talked briefly about that as well, and Shannon mentioned, tell me if I'm mischaracterizing this, Beverly, but Shannon mentioned forming a group to better look at that shared interests of that set of locations there and what that means. I'm concerned that the consideration, like Luke mentioned, is potentially undervalued. And there may be some things that the partners have agreed to already through the mediation, which you shared with me, on Ocean Pines, that's already been accounted for, that really doesn't provide consideration to the community association. I live on Beachwalker. I'm concerned about impacts to Beachwalker with various scenarios. I think that the town and community association could and should work together on what a visitor center looks like. The mayor brought up some ideas on that last week at the workshop, but you know, an off-site visitor center where that could or should be located, how that operationally affects flow onto and off of Kiowa, which is a town interest, is of concern to me. And I'm very concerned in general, and want to make sure we put very bright spotlights on things that draw further traffic towards Kiowa, as we've discussed, increasing membership outside the gates, plus the offset at the Kiowa Partners Town Hall in October 2024, the offset to concerns from members about tea times was, don't worry, Orange Hill is going to fix it. So it's really bi-directional traffic that could start loading up our systems and causing additional congestion. I think we need to make sure traffic studies are done properly, and we need to account for broader implications of, we've got Cacique, now we're talking about Orange Hill, where else could we be talking about? And I do think that the town has an interest in making sure that that growth is thought about properly.
All right, Madeline, your turn.
Yes, yes.
No, I have, I appreciate you guys all being so thoughtful about this, and I appreciate Kevin reaching out and kind of establishing that as a protocol to make sure that each of us was contacted and alerted, and it's a real good rule going forward. Having been involved in all the discussions and the work around the structure of the ARB, I think that is in a place now that it's going to be, I think the foundation is well set to move forward with the way you populate that, the responsibilities that are given to the various components of that whole thing. The challenges now in things like gate access, things like the real estate building. I would have lobbied for a right of second refusal. If you guys got the right of first refusal, maybe it's still a negotiation point. But I guess there might be other options as well
Can I
surrounding that property.
mention one more thing? That I asked Kevin about the phasing, and he explained the rationale of, you know, funding, resourcing, personnel, all that stuff. Nothing's changed today, as we all said. I don't think we do anything proactively as far as DRB until there is something operationally in place. I know we put the provisions in. It's taken us 3 years to get to this point. I appreciate the burst of energy to get this across this transom to the next phase. But we do have a history that with things that were supposed to happen post-ARDA, them not happening fast. So I'm encouraged by today. I'm also leery of, you know, how long will this really take?
Right. So suffice it to say that I think any of us will be willing to help in any way that you guys would like, as members of the community, not necessarily as members of council. But I think we're at a place now where the establishment of the ARB can move forward, all the details around that, the issues surrounding Orange Hill still need a lot of public input.
That was quite the update, Councilmember Tay. Councilmember Farrell.
I think in the interest of time, I'm just going to pass.
Okay. Councilmember Spencer, you don't get to quite pass.
I was almost gonna say I forgot what I was gonna say, but after all this, couple quick things. Cell towers. it continues to progress. There's communication between the town, Crown Castle, who owns 4 of the sites that are under discussion right now, and the resort on site-specific considerations. I don't see Mr. Taylor, but just this morning, the resort weighed in on one of 2 options for the Ocean Park, Ocean Course tower. And there's going to be shared action by the resort, Crown Castle, and the town to make that happen. Crown Castle and the carriers all continue to reiterate oh, they are. I didn't see it. There's a desire and investment to improve Kiowa. So more to come on that. Same thing, Mr. Taylor spoke with AT&T in the last week, besides a written update that we got about desire and intention to run fiber to Kiowa. Like anything, that takes work, but the wheels are starting to turn on what it takes for AT&T to do that. I did share with Shannon and Beverly in our meeting what's going on with that as well. There will definitely need to be plenty of coordination with KICA. The last major update had been back in May, and we did include Jody in that meeting. Then there's been a lot of AT&T at the drawing board since then, trying to figure out how to come forward, and this is kind of what they're bringing forward to us now. So I haven't really had a chance even to update him yet, because this is still fairly breaking news, but did share that with Kika when we met about a week ago. So that's going forward. You know, I hate to say going forward because all this stuff takes time. It's construction, it's investment, it does take time, but it definitely is turning in the right direction and with the right energy behind it. The last thing that I'll mention is we had a good update at the discussion at the town council workshop last week with, I call it Carter, but it's really the Council of Governments. So, and thanks to Craig Harris for teeing this up with them through the monthly and other ongoing engagements with them about the desire and intent to start bringing better transit to Kiowa, support workforce, support tourism, support the community. There's a lot of different considerations. The MUSC facility has caught CARTA's attention. They're very interested in the fact that that exists down here now. Andrea Kozlowski, who's their Deputy Director of Operations, met with us last week at our Infrastructure Public Works Committee meeting a week from this Thursday, the 12th, from 10 to 12. The first agenda item is going to be Ron Mitchum, who's the Director of the Council of Governments, and Andrea is going to come as well. And we've broadened invites to that meeting. It's a public meeting, but we've broadened that beyond the usual committee members and resort Kika club participation to include some of our neighbors. We've invited SAPOA and the Seabrook Island Club, Freshfields Village, and MUSC to also come so that we can be more as efficient as possible in these conversations, represent this end of the islands to CARTA and Council of Governments effectively, and try to coordinate how we provide inputs and work to provide whatever service this turns into, whether it be bus, van, pools, combinations of other things.
Thank you. The town administrator.
Yes, I just have a few things as well. So just to let you all know that we have collars for both coyote and bobcats. So the Environmental and Natural Resource, which is Jim's department, they put out the traps yesterday for coyotes, and for bobcats, we have 5 collars. So far, as of yesterday, we have collared 3, hoping to catch 2 more. There has been 8 coyote sightings, or there were 8 coyote sightings in January. And I believe the main reason for this is just of mating season. Is that correct, Jim? And that they're just kind of active right now, so that's why there's a little bit more last month than previous months. Also, just like to let everyone know that from a building service department, our building services has received revisions for West End, which is the Upper Beach Walker project for Kiowa Partners. So we were waiting on, essentially they submitted their drawings. Our building services reviewed them. They had some comments. They submitted those back to them several months ago. So we have received those revisions. Should take anywhere, I think, between 2 to 4 weeks or so. Couple weeks to review those. Again, those are the 2 parcels, the church parcel and the parcel adjacent to that.
Which one?
On Upper Beach Walker.
11 or 10?
11. And the one adjacent to it, correct? I'm not sure that number. Is that
Yeah, parcel
10?
11, church parcel,
Yeah,
parcel 11.
Yeah,
Okay.
11 church. So it's those 2 parcels, so we have received revisions, and it'll take a couple weeks on that. Also, this is just, again, from a staffing standpoint, I'll try to do this every month if we have staff celebrating anniversaries. Mike Gamrell, who is with the Environmental Natural Resource, will be celebrating 2 years this month with the town. So I'd like to congratulate him. And then, yes, I would like to also echo Councilmember Berner and thanking Director Harris on his work with regards to the storm. It was amazing. He did a lot of work with regards to this, and also Brian Gottschalk, who also worked in helping with storm prep and getting Mr. Gary Otter all set up in case we needed the services. So I'd like to thank both of them. That's it.
Stephanie, before you leave that, Craig, you know I was out of power for 7 hours yesterday, or Monday or Sunday, right? You know that. You don't need to answer. I'm just making sure you know I was out without power for 7 hours. Tongue in cheek.
Thank you, Stephanie. There are no items of old business. The first item of new business is under tab 3 to consider approval of an amendment, a minor amendment, as discussed a little bit earlier, to ordinance 2026-05. I would entertain a motion for approval on first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Now we can have some discussion. Need to provide a little bit of background and context on this. This little rifle shot we are considering on first reading at the specific request of Seabrook Island Utility Commission, and I think also the town of Seabrook Island Council to some extent, before they are willing to entertain any further conversations with regard to providing potential wastewater connection to the municipal center complex. I continue to be, and this is for the public record, simply confounded by the approach that Seabrook Island Utility is taking to this historically and continues to take. So I want a little refresh on history. The town apparently approached Seabrook Island Utility to provide sewer connection back when this facility was being built. Reviewed I don't know what the kind of the substance of the request was, but I reviewed the response thereto, which was a very summary, less than 1 page, no. So that goes back several years. And my understanding is that the stated reason was they didn't want to take on any service obligations beyond their otherwise, outside the town of Seabrook Island municipal limits or outside their erstwhile contractual obligations, which, by the way, they are providing wastewater to Kiowa River Estates on this side of us. They're providing it to Freshfields Village in the town of Kiowa Island, and they're also providing it to Cacique. And they are supposedly contractually obligated to provide service to all of the Andel tracts, which could include 1,600 additional homes, plus build out of Kiowa River, et cetera. So the stated reason was basically, we don't want to take on an additional capacity responsibilities, which, I mean, we are a literal, figurative drop in the bucket in terms of their capacity issues. We've done the engineering calculations, and it works out to the equivalent of this current facility, about 5 to 6 equivalent residential units, about the same as 5 homes for this current facility. You double that for the new one, versus they just added Seafields, they just added MUSC, they continue to add in Cacique, continue add in Kiowa River Estates, and supposedly they would have to have the capacity for as many as 1,600 homes that could be built around Freshfields Village by Riverstone, the resort affiliate, which is that ever going to happen? No current plans, and be surprised that if, at least under that family's ownership, you'd ever have 1,600 single-family homes built down here at 4 houses per acre. So
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, excuse me.
Yeah.
1,600 homes, and we're the equivalent of 5 homes?
Yes.
10 with the expansion.
Thank
10
you.
to 12.
Thank you.
So the capacity issue has really never made any sense to me. There's no real precedent created if they provide service to us, and we could certainly address service-related issues or any precedential issues. But fast forward, that's history. So Stephanie and I reached out when I was starting to kind of plan with, thinking about what we might be doing here from the expansion of the municipal center complex. Stephanie and I reached out to them again in last November, met with them in December of 2024. Had a meeting with them here. Thanks, but no thanks. Just not interested in providing. And understand, a little additional context. Seabrook Island benefits, and Seabrook Island residents benefit from utilization of this facility. There were Seabrook Island residents at the event you held last week. They participate in Kiowa Island Arts Council programs, our data suggests 10 to 15% of attendees are typically Seabrook Island residents. The Seabrook Island Town Council has held a council meeting in this. They would benefit further from the expansion of this facility and additional community meeting space. It's better for the environment if we're on sewer rather than septic, and the environmental risk opposed, that could result in spillage into Hulliver Creek, which directly impacts Seabrook Island. We've always said we would be willing to shoulder the entire cost of this project. No cost to Seabrook Island residents, ratepayers. In fact, we would be paying the non-resident rate, which Seafields pays, which is a higher rate. So actually further subsidizing Seabrook Island residents. So struggling to understand. So we had this one meeting more than a year ago, no. Once this project felt well along, said, like to meet again. This was in September, early September. First kind of said, sorry, our position hasn't changed, don't really see the need to meet, but if you really want to, we will. Well, we had a conversation and some back and forth, and actually seemed like there was then the potential for some forward movement, which we said is we always were interested in connecting to the force main that runs right up to Kiowa River States, right along the portion of the road that we now own in our right-of-way along Betsy Carrison Parkway. And they said, well, there are technical issues. Well, okay. We checked with Alliance Engineering. Brian, he reached out to Alliance, one of our on-call engineers. We also had the architects engineers working on this project, ADC. Both said, yes, it's much more challenging to connect rather than just a gravity line that you're connecting into a force main. You're going to have a lift station, a pump, and you're going to have to equalize pressure, and you have to carefully engineer all that. But that's what engineers designed to do, and they say they do this stuff fairly routinely. So there's no technical impediment. So again, we thought there was going to be, they said, okay, let's have our engineers talk to one another. Seemed to be some potential movement forward. Then we got a couple of responses that said, where was the one that said, then, 11th, we actually had outreach from our engineers here, and this was in November. SIU continues to evaluate whether connecting to Kiowa Town Hall makes sense or not. And if it does decide to connect, and this is the second time I'd heard this from a council member, we will be required to connect to their gravity drain line at the Freshfields pumping station. What does that mean? Rather than just a straight shot right here, where there's no further permitting, we own all the property, we would have to run a force main ourselves cross our property underneath or along Haulover Creek onto onto Freshfields Village property that we don't own. So we would have to have DES permits, Army Corps of Engineer permits, we'd have to get an easement agreement with Freshfields Village, and it would take a year to 3 years to do that and all the construction, plus all the risks, environmental risk in Haulover Creek.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I was just going to ask, there are no environmental impacts if we just could go across the street to the force main, is that correct?
None that we've been apprised of. I mean, sure, you've got to make sure you do it, you know, correctly. You have the appropriate connection and seal and everything.
But you're not going
equalized
through
perimeter.
500 feet of wetlands with a
No,
pipe?
we're literally, you know, it's, what is it, a couple hundred yards?
Okay.
Yes.
So is there legal recourse to this series of no's and roadblocks?
Well,
we've done?
I want to be careful there.
That's why I asked.
So I want to be careful there. So they've said connection there, which told us, our engineers and me, that there really wasn't any good faith interest because they knew that there was that did not come close to lining up with our time frame.
And then their original capacity argument no longer holds water.
It never, I don't believe it ever did. But then they've insisted on something else, which I'll come back to in a minute. So nonetheless, we keep trying in good faith to have these conversations. I've had multiple conversations with my counterpart, with other council members. As you may recall, we affirmatively reached out to Seabrook Island and I did to the mayor, to recommend a Seabrook resident to participate in our design selection
Yes.
committee. In order, again, trying to be a kind of a good neighbor and collaborate on all of this. And yet, at every turn, it's pushback. So now where we are,
Pushback or flat-out rejection?
well, it is not explicitly a flat-out rejection, but there's that condition and another one, where they're asking us to change an ordinance that they don't like, that we put in place because we were not getting any traction. And they're saying, well, you have to abide by our ordinance that requires a referendum, an actual vote of all the of Seabrook residents to approve providing coverage outside of Seabrook Island. And that's not otherwise contractually committed. I said, well, if you want us to amend an ordinance, you can amend an ordinance too. We're carving you out, you carve us out. Again, this is all beneficial. We sent them what we thought was a pretty straightforward, simple term sheet, high level. Let's just wrap all this up together in one little agreement. They basically tore that up and sent a more recent letter with like 9 different conditions, something like that, including this one that can only connect over in Freshfields Village and this referendum. Oh, and they also wanted to send them a check right now for $25,000 to cover some of the costs they've incurred. So the way I'm looking at this right now is I want to take another run at this because there are, we believe, contractual basis for us actually being able to obtain service because we are a successor in interest to the original property owner where a lot of this infrastructure sited, particularly on the roundabout. And there are provisions in there that specifically contemplate connecting to a force main. The other issue around all this is I discussed that we would be willing to waive any franchise fees, business license fees. They actually don't have a franchise agreement with us. They don't even have a business license agreement with us. So we haven't paid business license fees or franchise fees, and they've been seeming to take the position that they can do what they want in the town of Kiowa Island, and we just have to live with it, unfettered. So that's kind of where we are. Now, having said that, I still want to take another crack at this, one more turn. So in good faith, I told them in advance that yes, we will approve, because they asked to approve on first reading, this ordinance change. Whether we ever get to second reading or not completely depends on what transpires over the course of the next couple of weeks. But at the end of the day, you know, either we work out something, we've got an alternative solution. It's not optimal for the environment. In other respects, it doesn't allow us to best utilize this piece of property. We do have an alternative, but then if we're not able to reach resolution, then we're going to be in the position that we're just going to be looking to enforce our contractual rights and all our ordinance provisions, whether it's franchise ordinance, business licenses, encroachment, so on. So,
Okay.
questions? Nope. Comments?
Yes. Questions?
Yeah.
So, the way I'm reading this, and this is the first I've seen this, was when it was in the packet. One, I totally agree. I think we should connect to sewer. I think that's the cleanest solution. I don't know why it's a problem. I'm all supporting, you know, efforts to get that done. This reads to me like it's taking them off the hook of an obligation to connect sewer to locations they might be the responsible party to connect sewer to. So we're really not getting anything from town hall necessarily, but potentially other places where there'd be development, they're no longer obligated. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, one of the things they've been adamant about is we don't want it, if we were to agree, even if we, like said, we'll spend $5 million and spend 3 years connecting to Freshfields Village or whatever it is, that we don't want any precedent established that we are then, if, their big concern is if the town were to annex a bunch of other area, and
Where
there's a
they're
bunch
already
of
providing service.
residential, that they not obligated to provide service.
Like if we wanted to annex Keel River Estates where
Yes.
they're already providing
Yeah.
service. Yeah.
Yeah, Kiowa River, I just don't know.
That one's an easy one.
Yeah.
But that's not, that would not necessarily be part of an agreement. The hookup would only be for.
Yes, part of the term sheet that we sent them, high-level term sheet, was simply, yes, this is a one-off for connection to the municipal center complex.
That's an illegitimate concern.
I mean, sure, if I were them, belt and suspenders, fine to say, we just want to make sure this isn't establishing any precedent for the town annex that we're obligated to provide additional service. Yes, we indicated that we were absolutely willing to do that.
So I understand what you're trying to do, and I don't want to be a speed bump. And when I suggest when I'm done, I don't think is, I would like for something like this to have gone through the Infrastructure and Public Works Committee and then bring a recommendation in. I understand time sensitivity perhaps and what you're trying to do. I could still put it on the agenda next week and we could still talk about it after first reading, just to, catch up on that piece.
And that's certainly fine, and welcome the continued input, because this is just first reading.
Yeah.
And I would be fully prepared to go to second reading, assuming that we can get all of these other issues tied up. But I've not yet, they started to throw, Stephanie will recall, after they kind of threw away the capacity issue, they said, well, engineering, complexity issues. That's why we immediately followed up with our engineers. And, you can just do Google AI searches, yes, you can connect to force mains. It's a more involved process, more costly, but you can do it. People do it all the time.
So we passed this at first reading, and what are they doing in return again?
So the next step is working with, I should note, and he's just listening to all this, and he's not going to be able to say much, as the town attorney's firm it conflicted itself out of this. So we've retained an additional firm, and we need to respond to the last letter communication that we received from their counsel that set forth all these supposedly non-negotiable provisions, and make very clear that, if those are truly non-negotiable, and two of them are complete non-starters, and they know that, just doesn't line up in any way, shape, form, or fashion from a cost standpoint or timing standpoint. They know that. So it just tells me it's not clear to me that there's a good faith interest in doing this, and I just don't understand that. But nonetheless, we're gonna, I said, we'll operate in good faith, go down this path. You asked for this, we'll do it.
I'm still not clearly understanding what happens on their end. You said if we pass this, you said you'd agree to pass this on first reading.
Then we will send back a letter saying that we did this as you requested, and no, the connection, for all the reasons, we'll talk about the benefits of the project, the connection has to be over here.
Okay.
And that,
So that really drives our counter response.
yes,
to-
and that there, no, a referendum doesn't work either. You do exactly what we did, and you carve out from, the application of that referendum,
That's the,
that ordinance,
that's the counter action.
yeah, yes,
Okay.
just like we did on first reading, do that in fairly short order, just like we did. And by the way, there's an argument to be made, and I think a good argument, that referendum doesn't even apply because of our successor in interest position to the original landowner that developed all this and the predecessor to SIUC back in 1990.
We would need to see
I
some
have a-
positive movement on their
Yes,
side.
to do second reading. Okay.
So, I mean, this is.
But we're
I mean,
showing it could be done.
This could be, we could be done with this in
A month.
a matter of days.
Oh.
I mean, it could be just, it's clear it's not gonna happen.
But we are requesting, by passing this on first reading, then we expect their town council.
That will be back in the response that you wanted us, our town council, to modify and carve out from application, one of your ordinance provisions, its application to us,
But
I would do the same
resistance-
thing.
The resistance isn't coming from their town council, it's coming from
At this
sewage
point,
treatment.
at this point, it's not entirely clear to me that there's a lot of separation. The town council seems to be aggrieved that, we have this provision that purports to, require the Seabrook Island Utility to do something if they are choosing to do business in our town. And I kind of had the conversation, the flip side of, so would you not have any concern about the town of Keel Island exercising any jurisdictional authority in the town of Seabrook without your say-so?
Does this relieve them of any of the other obligations that you described earlier? That, when you were talking about the capacity and the 1,600 homes and all the.
No,
that doesn't
those are
relieve them of any
all
of that.
other
That's already
contractual that
done.
we don't have any say-so whatsoever over. Again, I'm trying to solve for literally just providing sewer connection, wastewater connection to this complex. That's all. We'll pay for the entire cost. It benefits the entire community. It's good for the environment.
So it doesn't drive septic anywhere in the existing community. It still holds them to their obligations. And all it does is,
It
for
doesn't,
future
doesn't
expansion.
touch their other obligations.
Yeah,
Just-
so for future expansion, which we have no intentions of right now, then, okay.
So my understanding from a month or so ago was that the resistance was all from the sewer authority.
Well, the communications we've received, two lengthy communications, this one with all these conditions, have been from the law firm representing the utility commission.
Okay, but now we've also sensed resistance from the council.
Well, the council, I've heard directly from the mayor and council that they are not happy about this one provision. And that we're trying to kind of force the utilities commission's hand, and I said,
But nothing else
yes,
has worked.
yes, that's absolutely right, but we're happy to, not go down this path.
I've heard third hand, Seabrook Town Council is very unhappy, very angry at us.
About that provision?
Yes. Third hand, so
Yes,
it's,
and they
I've
are,
heard it
and I
third hand.
said, we said, yes, that's fine, we'll address that.
They should have done it before this even came up.
Yes, I mean, the issue
Okay.
is, the reason it got to that is because we kept getting no, and then we got a kind of, okay, maybe, and then then followed up with, it looked like it might be on a good path. all of a sudden being told, well, the only option we'll consider is one that they knew was not
Yeah.
acceptable to us.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, might as well say no. And I don't want to draw this out longer than need be, but ethically, we're against septic, we're for sewer, for all the reasons we are. Is there any future scenario where we would do an annexation, and now we've taken this off the table, and we're driving sewer in some kind of...
Take what off?
Taking their obligation to provide, say the town of Kiowa does grow, and it takes into account some tracks that get developed that
Well,
would have been
they
better.
are owned by the town of Seabrook Island.
I know they are.
As a general matter, they push back on whether we have the authority to do what we did, and said, you can't make us do things outside our jurisdiction, but you're choosing.
They've already done it.
You're
yeah.
choosing to do business. Nobody's holding a
horse
gun
left
to
the
your
barn.
hand in the town of Kiowa Island.
Yeah.
So this kind of a franchise agreement issue generally. They would be required, or might, there is a provision of state law that would certainly have a similar effect for residents in their own municipal boundaries.
I'm just, I'm playing through the KIU conversations when we sat down with Becky and I just forgot his name. They don't want to extend their infrastructure either. So I'm just trying to think through who provides sewer if take this option off the table
One of
and
these,
there's annexation.
these are kind of bigger picture issues. So this gets into the, what is it, the 508, the COG, who has jurisdiction over what? This is odd because Kiowa Island Utility is regulated by the PSC, the Public Service Commission, privately owned utility. They are not, Seabrook Island Utility is a municipal-owned entity, so it's not regulated by the PSC. They kind of have these service areas, but those are not clearly kind of defined. And the odd thing is, we've been in conversation when John is here, about the urban growth boundary. The whole concept is the urban growth boundary is you can grow inside the urban growth boundary because you have sewer provision.
We
But
talked about
not
that
to
last week.
extend sewer on the other side, so as not to contribute to additional growth there.
Have a
You
mix.
have much less development. You could have septic because you only have one house per acre or something like that. Where you have more dense development within the urban growth boundary, what you don't want to have is everybody on septic in an urban environment.
Like behind us.
Yeah.
Correct, like
Yes.
behind us.
So, but there is, we're kind of, we tried to parse every aspect of this.
So for first reading, you're asking approval for first reading. You're okay for us to look at it next week in the meantime?
Absolutely, and
It
again,
sends a message.
That's what I'm
It
thinking.
sends a message,
It can be done.
yes.
that we're willing to,
a
we've
good neighbor.
always been willing to make the
To
accommodation.
be a good neighbor to
Yes, to be a good neighbor.
and to be an environmental steward.
Yeah,
Yeah, why didn't you ask?
yeah.
Yeah,
So, anyway.
okay.
Any further questions or discussion?
Can I just summarize
Yes.
my understanding? So, for the ability to connect to the high-pressure line, what we're talking about is the Kiowa would pay for all expenses for connection. The capacity would be 10 to 12 housing units when the expansion is built. There would be no precedent set for any additional priority purchases of any properties. We're trying to be a good environmental steward, so there'd be little or no environmental impact for the connection to the high-pressure line. And for doing these things, we'd waive their franchise or business fee for the municipal utility that's next door.
Oh, no, for the town as a whole.
The town as a whole, okay,
Yeah.
town as a
So
whole.
that they have not, they don't have a business license to do business in the town of Kiowa Island. They don't have a franchise agreement with
Okay. And then the only other condition is no referendum would apply
Yes.
for
So how much would
Seabrook.
that business license be, more or less, order of magnitude?
I think DeRoe had looked, it would not, the business license would not be particularly significant. Franchise fee, we could charge a 3 or 5%, that might be non-de minimis, but that's just a pass-through. So that would,
True.
that would.
That would be a pass-through.
That's a direct pass-through on the bill.
That's true.
So there would be a cost savings, or there would be no future impact to Kiowa Seabrook residents. In fact, it'd be a cost savings to
Because
the future.
they charge a higher rate
Right.
For customers outside the municipal boundaries. So Freshfields customers.
So we'd subsidize them, and they would not be paying a franchise tax.
And by the way, which is typically done in this case, we actually convey the infrastructure to them.
Paul has a question or comment.
Yes, sir.
I'm Paul Hennessy. I am a director of KICA. I understand what's going on here, I think. I appreciate the complexity. It is what it is. I just want to make sure that KICA is not caught in the crossfire here. So it's unclear to me, but this is new to me, so cut me a little slack. It's unclear to me what's new here. When I look at Chapter 2, Chapter 2 says, it's short, Section 10-201, it shall be unlawful for any person to provide utility services including electricity, natural gas, water, wastewater, broadband connectivity, cable television, telephone, or other telecommunication services without the approval of the town. Is this new?
No.
Okay, so this is already in place. Okay.
The only thing, Paul, when we amended this Article 10 utilities, what we did, there was only the sewerage provisions that were under that article previously. So you think the part that was called sewerage, the consent, franchise, or operating agreement requirement language was already in the town's municipal code. It was buried in the business license portion of the code.
Okay.
We simply moved, it was pre-existing, we simply moved it over.
Okay, and so maybe my question is an adjacent one, unintentionally. But if we renegotiate our contract with Comcast to provide cable service
No problem.
inside the front gate, do we need your approval to do that?
No, we have the ability to require the franchisee to have a franchise agreement with the town, whether or not the KICA, which owns its roads, wants to provide access to its roads and right-of-way to any service provider is up to KICA.
Okay, so
Is
the
that-
utility agreement that we have for cable is not going to be impacted, past, present, or future, in any way by this ordinance?
No.
No.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a private agreement between you and Comcast.
Any further questions, discussions?
No, hope you don't mind that I answered that.
We have a motion pending. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next agenda item. Hopefully this, we can get through this one more quickly. Mr. Jordan. This is ordinance 2026-6, and this is basically a repeal and replacement of our fish and wildlife ordinance provisions.
Correct. So kind of similar to what we did with the beach management ordinance last year, this is another one that we knew had some issues. It had some inaccurate information. And so we took the same approach. We looked at other municipalities. We talked at length within the environmental committee. And so I sent you a summary memo yesterday that just kind of highlights the changes and the reasons for this. And I'll briefly run through that. But basically, we structured this new chapter the same way we did the beach management ordinance. We started with a definition section. I guess the next thing we did was we had existing issues where when this code was originally adopted, it referenced the existing game and bag limits for fish that are long since obsolete. And so in this new version, we just adopt whatever SCDNR's current bag limits are and size limits are. We added protection for bobcats, alligators, and birds from harassment and harm. In our previous, in the previous ordinance, alligators were not in any way protected, even though they're protected under state law, so that was something we wanted to get in there. And then in the prior version, it only referenced birds of prey. Now all birds are protected. Prohibits the feeding of wildlife, so this is new. There are exemptions for bird feeders and pest control activities, which would use bait, which would technically constitute feeding. And primarily this was done to address the intentional feeding of deer, which can cause issues. Prohibits the keeping of exotic animals, chickens, ducks, horses, sheep, etc. Something we didn't have on the books, but most every other municipality does. Yes, sir.
Back to number 4, does it prohibit feeding of alligators?
It does.
Okay, good, thank you.
Well, yes, there's
it
actually a
does.
separate provision that specifically addresses the feeding of
Okay,
alligators.
thank you.
No, it does, 15504B does say no person shall feed, entice with food, harm, harass, or kill any alligator.
Right, yep.
Thank you.
And so the next one would be requires owners to collect and dispose of pet excrement. That's something most other municipalities have. We don't have it, so we thought it would be good to add that. A couple things on, we prohibited chumming on the beach and specifically granted our code enforcement officers to include beach patrol, the authority to restrict surf fishing if they deem that that activity poses a threat to public safety. And then the last change was, in this ordinance, we do adopt all of the provisions of state code, but we wanted to specifically list out, especially in the watercraft section, the codes that we would apply ourselves, just so it was very clear that if we were going to enforce one of those, we would have a specific town code reference to write a ticket or a summons. And so that's effectively what we've done. Obviously, this would be a repeal and replace, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So Jim, I have a question on 15506, which is keeping of certain animals.
Yes, sir.
It says this section does not apply to licensed wildlife rehabilitators or nature centers. Are we one of those?
There's a nature center at resort.
Well,
I'm talking about here on site.
Yeah, so we're exempted from pretty much everything in here.
How does that happen?
That's in 15503, so the provisions of this chapter shall not apply to SCDNR personnel, the town's wildlife management personnel.
Oh, I see. So the town's wildlife management personnel, AKA you.
We're exempted from all of these provisions. So we can
Okay.
keep chickens, we can feed alligators.
That's where I was going.
Yep.
Okay.
So that exotic
All right, thank
animal
you.
in your office is
Thank you.
okay?
Yeah, I was thinking of what, yeah.
So that exemption was added specifically for the nature center because they've got exotic animals that they have on display.
No, I was worried about what you had in your office.
No, I'm still legal.
Animals in your office are okay.
Outside his back door and inside crawling
All
around.
right, thank you.
I'm not aware that he has anything crawling around in it.
No, I don't.
Not intentionally, anyway.
That's right.
So I would entertain a motion for approval of ordinance of 2026.
So moved.
06 on first reading.
Second.
Any further questions or discussion? Yes.
Just one thing,
Okay.
if y'all check with DNR on 1508, the chumming prohibition, because I know that's come up in other municipalities, there's been some lawsuits filed by fishermen, I think DNR is basically saying, look, adopt section 509, but you can't adopt anything that controls the methods and means of how fish are caught. So just something maybe to consider before
A second reading? Okay.
because that's come up on Seabrook, Isle Palms, with a bunch of my coastal clients.
Even that close to the beach? I would think that would be an easy no way.
So is that one that where there is specific preemption, potentially, or field preemption? Because generally you can be more restrictive as long as you're not inconsistent, unless you're specifically preempted or there's a general concept of field preemption.
Yeah, the way DNR explained it to me is we can't even, like, they as an organization or an agency can't even do this. It's gotta come from the legislature in terms of like bag limits yeah,
Okay.
I would just seek clarification from them, because I know this, I'm positive this came up on Isle of Palms and Seabrook. Where
Okay.
the DNR, like, general counsel reached out about an ordinance we were considering, because there, it was the issue with the drones, where people were chumming, flying a drone out and dropping the bait out of the ocean. They were trying to prohibit that. And we were able to craft an ordinance that DNR was okay with, that the towns and cities were okay with too.
Can you send us that then? I mean, chumming that, I mean, to me, it's a no decision. You should not chum that close to the beach. I just,
I think some of the municipalities did what DNR asked, other of my clients did not. They were like, no, we're prohibiting this.
Why would you want to do that?
In terms of,
Why would you want to drop chum that close
It,
to?
it depends on you're more interested in supporting fishermen or you're more interested in supporting swimmers, people recreating.
wow, okay.
I mean, is that, it's
yeah, I
not
mean,
quite that.
I think all of the municipalities were concerned
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
DNR just said that you're getting into territory that you shouldn't get into, because if you can regulate like chumming, then you can also regulate like when you can use sonar, and where to use that, and the methods and means. So it's, in their mind, it's kind of a slippery slope. I would just check with DNR about it.
Okay, all right.
But we've also prohibited motor vehicles, motorized vessels within, separately.
Certain distance of the beach, yes.
Certain distance of the beach. Personal water, 100 yards of the Atlantic coastline. So, I mean, is that problematic as well? I mean, that's clearly within, we've got police powers out to 1 mile, but we're limited in the exercise of police powers because supposedly the state was reserved for itself through the.
So 511C is straight from state code. So we pulled that straight from state code. So state code prohibits watercraft within 100 yards of the beach, of the Atlantic Ocean coast.
Okay.
And it
So we
does-
should be good on that one.
It doesn't prohibit, it just prohibits more than idle speed. So you can have a boat in that area, you just
That
can't
is correct.
go fast.
Yep, I read that
So
incorrectly.
there are some instances, generally, you can be, a municipality can be more restrictive than state law unless state law explicitly says you can't be more restrictive, or there is some like the pension, rodenticides, where there's provision that specifically preempts municipalities from enacting anything. Then there is this general concept of kind of field preemption, but generally, you can be more restrictive. You always should be pretty safe in just adopting the exact same language and then putting into your code the ability to enforce locally what is prohibited by state law.
All right, so the watercraft thing, so when I was at, and were at the Swim Across America this last fall, the resort had personal watercraft within that 100 yards because they were monitoring and looking for distressed swimmers. So that would be technically in violation.
As long as they're not going past idle speed.
That's the
I
exemptions.
can't hear you.
As long as they're not going faster than idle speed.
Yeah, but they were. Oh, that was you guys? Okay. So they did. But
But
no, they
they're
were going-
exempted
Where are they exempted?
in 503. Yeah,
I found the email with
Okay.
DNR general counsel
Okay.
for this other municipality. She says DNR takes the position that we are the only entity that can regulate fishing. However, town council can regulate their beaches for safety of its citizens. For example, they can pass an ordinance that you cannot fish within a certain distance of swimmers, et cetera. Happy to discuss further if you'd like. I've been in contact with at least 2 other municipalities who also want to address the conflict between fishermen and other beachgoers.
okay.
So, again, I think 509 is good, and that's how kind of how DNR explained it to me, is that, look, your code enforcement officers can be empowered to stop any sort of fishing that threatens the safety of beachgoers or swimmers, but we wouldn't get specific and say no chumming allowed at all, like generally. So, anyway.
Okay, so we'll need to look at that a little further before,
But
prior
like,
to
of
second
the
reading.
municipalities that consider this, some have, out
Okay.
of respect for DNR, said we agree, we'll amend the ordinance. Others have just said we don't care, we care about the safety of our beachgoers more than shark fishing, so we're just prohibiting it anyways.
Where do you think I am on that one?
I think I know who you are. But there were, if you Google it, there have been lawsuits like up and down the coast where shark fishermen have sued municipalities.
Okay.
Fight that battle.
Any further questions or comments? We have a motion pending. If nothing further, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Jim. Next matters of business are appointments to various committees and boards. First one is Audit Committee. I don't know if, Mr. Chairman of the Audit Committee, you'd like to present the committee members, or Dorota?
Skip C, are we, because we tabled it, or?
You're skipping over C, you have to acknowledge that?
Oh, I have the old agenda.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
as
Got
per our conversation earlier today.
okay.
See, I was delivered a copy via email, so I should know that the agenda has been changed, so I apologize, Mr. Mayor. Where are we, Audit Committee?
Yeah.
So let me just say that we had a very nice turnout of volunteers, as I mentioned before, and I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Jeffrey Cook for member for the Audit Committee for a 2-year term, which we've edited in our charter because we believe continuity for the Audit Committee is important. Mr. Cook has, I'm not going to go through his whole resume, but he has very strong experience working with the General Electric corporate audit staff. He's been finance manager for several GE entities and CFO of 3 of the companies, both public and private companies. So strong commitment to the role of audit in his previous business experience. So I'd like to put him forth for approval to the Audit Committee.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. The Board of Zoning Appeals. John, just one clarification. I just would make sure the memo that is in the materials references this an appointment to the Planning Commission, but that's not correct. Is that, I mean, I just want to, this is an appointment to the? Okay. The memo says, what's that?
The real-time version says Board of Zoning Appeals.
Oh, is that right? Okay. Okay. Mr. Degnan was has been recommended by the planning director. I don't know who, was anybody else involved in the chairman of the board? And I am perfectly willing to accept the recommendation of Mr. Degnan, looks well qualified. Any questions or comments?
And they determine their own chairman, right? Just like the planning commission?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah, that's what I thought.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next is the Board of Construction Appeals. There are 2 members to be appointed, Mr. John Gradick, and Mr. Matt Beamer. You have their background and bios. They're recommended by the staff, the building official, and I don't know who, if anybody else was involved, the chair of the, it was. Okay. Recommended by the building official. Any questions or comments?
I've just got a question operationally. So do they, if their company is affected by a matter before here, they recuse themselves? Is that how it works?
Well, they would be required, if there's a financial interest under state ethics laws, to recuse themselves. I don't have in front of me what the BZA charter or their operating procedures are, but yes.
So by design, we want builders and plumbers and stuff on here? I don't remember this one coming up last year, that's why I'm wondering. Yeah. Okay. So that's the design of the board, is to have professional licensed people like this?
Typically with someone with the experience.
I
But
just,
I will say, with this particular body, they come up every 3 years, but the regularity of their meeting, typically we have to force a meeting a year.
I don't remember there being one.
Just for them to stay in compliance, they typically have a meeting a year. But yes, if something comes up, then they will have to recuse themselves. But since I've been there for 10 years, I don't know if I think they may have had one. Yeah, I was gonna say, I remember one hearing.
That's why.
That's it, yes.
I don't question the ethics of individuals on here, I'm just questioning the construct of if there's an air conditioning issue, just because the name in question here, but it's another air conditioning company, is there a conflict? That's kind of what I'm trying to understand better.
Yeah, they wouldn't be permitted to vote on a matter that financially benefit themselves, a family member, or a business with which they're associated. They would need to recuse themselves from that vote. If it was financial.
So would another HVAC company be an example of that, a competitor?
No.
It would not, I mean, if I was consulted, I would tell them it's probably best to abstain just to avoid perception issues, but I don't think it's an Ethics Act issue.
Well, I mean, that's interesting you say that, because part of the reason they're in there is to have somebody with expertise on HVAC issues, and if they were, precluded from voting on any HVAC issues, then what's the purpose of having them on there with that experience?
Well, they could be there to educate the board on HVAC issues, but if it were just two HVAC companies in the whole world and they voted against it, they could have a financial interest.
That could be construed as being probably a indirect financial as opposed to a direct financial interest. But if you have literally dozens, if not hundreds, then pretty attenuated.
Okay, thanks.
All in favor?
Aye.
The Infrastructure and Public Works Committee, Mr. Chairman?
So we had no new applicants, and everybody that was on the committee asked to be renewed again this year. And I think we've gotten a lot done in the last year. I won't go through each qualification because I did that a year ago. But we're making good progress. We're hitting a stride, and I recommend approval to keep everything going on track.
Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next is the Planning Commission. So I will go ahead and mention Bob Martineau, who's actually joined us in the room. Good candidates. Bob distinguished himself by dint of his background, was recommended by the Planning Commission Chair, 30 years as an environmental and regulatory lawyer, has some specific expertise that would be valuable to the Planning Commission as it considers things like stormwater regulations and things related to that as we go forward. Any questions or comments regarding the recommendation? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And finally, the SATAX Committee, Mr. Chairman.
So I'm recommending appointment of all the existing members as well as a new member, Mr. Bill Richardson. Bill has got 50 years of experience in the hotel industry. This is specifically important to state accommodation tax issues, and he's still working as a director on the board of American Commerce Bank in the audit committee, so I've got somebody to talk to for audit as well as SATAX. So with those qualifications, I'd recommend Bill to be added to the existing board, and the existing board be reappointed.
And I know Mr. Richardson, through his work on the board of the Conservancy, as well as in other contexts, and I think that's an excellent recommendation. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, we've come to the end of new business. Citizen comments on any matter. Yes, sir. Yes, Phil.
Phil Mancusi-Ungaro, 13 Buffalohead Drive. I just have two issues I want to mention real quickly. On this Hap and Sam Spit, as the council knows, I sent a fairly detailed letter to the Corps as a citizen. Having 30 years of experience reviewing Section 404 permits, I was actually quite appalled that the application was so incomplete. It was amazing. And I highlighted the different aspects of the regs that they missed. One of which, as the mayor has talked about, is land ownership. That is something that's critical to the Corps' review. I've checked with the Corps. I still really can't get a response or a sense of where things stand on the permit review. Frankly, I recommended they withdraw the permit from being considered and ask for a new application. The other thing I want to do is just do a shout out and mention a couple things. I had power out for 8.5 hours at Peachaloot. We were one of the first ones to go out, I think, and we were the last street on the island to get power back. I know that because Ed Monahan, who I've known for 20 years, was calling and checking on us. Stephanie and I have been communicating all day long, trying to, just keep things moving. I know the Kika was putting messages out, although I didn't get some of them. Some of them came through late in the afternoon, which is the whole point of what I want to raise. And we've talked, Stephanie and I and Shannon have been talking about it, and Beverly, who's not here right now, she's been involved. But we just seem to need a better communications tool that can be reached. I know the town doesn't have the ability like Kika does to have a list of every resident on the island, but we just have to figure out a better way to share information. I didn't find out anything till afternoon, and we'd already been out for 3-4 hours at that point. So I had written a message to Shannon and to Stephanie, and they both agreed that, yeah, this is something we really need to focus on, and I appreciate the efforts that they've offered. And Beverly, I guess Beverly went to Iowa because they weren't even sure if the Kika messages were going out. So it just highlights the point that in these situations, we really need to improve our methods.
So I went out and I met the crew out there just around kind of 4:30.
Yeah.
And apparently Buffalo has 3 different zones.
Oh, yeah.
So the zone closest to Governor's Drive was on, and like 1 through 10 was on just before your house.
Or 13.
And in your house, and Goldeneye was off.
Well, and Berkeley should have known that because when we lost power during that summer storm a couple of years ago, we were the last block and they didn't even know we were out because they thought everybody else was done. But they didn't know we were out. So they should know. And on the infrastructure committee, we are talking to them about this because
Maybe they could get Buffalo to just be 1 zone instead of 3 zones.
I don't care about that. I just care about the claim that the infrastructure is in great shape.
Yeah.
I'm glad you made the point about the communication, by the way, because I think there were a lot of good efforts to do that. I appreciated, I think you came up several times on Iowa with updates. In fact, I think yours was one of the addresses that didn't show out that
Right.
was. Somebody's was. There were several of them. I was appreciative of when I heard yesterday at the Kika board meeting about opening the Sandcastle, for example, as a warm place. But we were talking that several of us didn't get any of the emails on that.
Right.
And I get everything. So I don't know how that broke down, but there was a great effort to provide for that and to communicate it. I just don't know where the breakdown happened.
Well, and Stephanie was trying to use Iowa to communicate, and sometimes they went and sometimes they didn't go. It was just something, there was a big hiccup in the system Sunday, and Berkeley was one of them.
Thank you, Phil. Well considered. I mean, we've discussed communications and coordination issues and in our own Communications Public Affairs Department strategic planning meeting. It's one of those issues that either we've encouraged our team to sit down with their counterparts and all the island organizations and exchange information to try to, game plan how to address these kinds of issues. I believe Kika, and appropriately so, is in a position to share all its association members' contact information. And yet in the town, you have to opt in. We keep encouraging people to opt in. So, there have been some pretty good instances of quickly coordinated communication on some issues where there's the same message going out from all the organizations. We kind of agree this is the sentence or two we're going to convey and we'll send this out. But I just, on things like this, it's inherently difficult because, guys in the field may be getting some different information than you're getting from corporate, and then also the situation changes. Every hour.
And corporate will tell you can't believe the guys in the field.
Yeah, vice versa, I suspect. Yeah. So, but yes, it's a good point, and we got to continue to try to work on these things.
As well as a community calendar.
Yes, that's another one we've talked about. Any other
Also
citizen
that.
comments? Council member comments. Oh, I'm sorry. We are now before council member comments. Actually, do we want to do council member comments first?
Sure.
Yes. Council member Berner.
I don't have any, thank you.
Councilmember
I've used up my allocation.
You did not last time.
I'm going to, again, in the interest of time,
I yield my time to the man from DC.
I have,
That's dangerous.
I have no comments at this point in time. I would entertain a motion to move into executive session under the relevant South Carolina FOIA statute provisions, and this is specifically regarding the pending Sam Spit litigation as well as settlement of a pending BZA matter.
so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
That's just a gentleman from DC.
And then we all say, who's that?
Thought he might be hiding back there.
Hope you've got a little nip of something back there.
Hope he shares it, is what.
It's like the picture, the time stays the same, but the picture moves. That's kind
If we did, we would never admit it, okay? Just saying.
Entertain a motion to return to regular session.
So move.
Second.
Favor? Aye. Aye. But no decisions were made with regard to matters pertaining to the Captain Sam Spit litigation. There was discussion with regard to a pending zoning appeal. I would entertain a motion. Would someone care to describe the motion, or would you like me to do so?
I move that we authorize council to negotiate a settlement agreement per the BZA issue.
Along the
As
lines
discussed in executive session, sorry.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
No further business pending before the council. We are adjourned.